This is the first time I've ever had a Rotary watch sent to me. Thanks to rotarywatches.com for sending this over. They've loaned me a unit of one of their upcoming watches to take a look at. This is apparently a limited edition line and there's only going to be 500 made. Let's see if it's worth pulling the trigger on it while you can. Now this one here is a production sample, or a working sample I think they called it. So the final version may be slightly different. This one isn't numbered as one of the 500, and I will be sending it back once I am done. Now this is a brand, Rotary, that's very popular in the UK, but not quite so much overseas from what I can gather online. I have actually taken a look at a few of their watches before, but not loads, and especially not one like this, which is like a proper original design one. I think this is a reissue of one of their older watches, one of their chronographs. And here it is, the RW 1895. As you can guess from the visuals here, it's not a pocket watch style watch despite the 1895. I believe that's more to do with the history of Rotary than anything else. It's much more of a 60s design we've got going on here. And the first thing I've noticed really is the size of this thing. Now, I'm not sure it quite comes across on camera, but it's pretty small for a chronograph. Probably quite faithful to the original, which I really don't know anything about, admittedly. It's semi-chunky because it's got this quite prominent domed crystal. And it's got a very small dial, and overall, it's quite narrow, which is pretty refreshing for a chronograph. You don't get that often. So I've got here widthways 37.6, lug to lug of 48.2, and a thickness of 13.6, including that domed crystal. So yeah, quite chunky. It really depends on the look you're going for. Now, Rotary watches I've always thought were semi-decent, but I've never been totally convinced about the quality and like the build quality, should I say, for the price and the level of finishing. And to some extent, that's kind of the same here, at least straight out of the box. They're selling this for $299 or £299. Yeah, £299 on this bracelet, and then you can get it on a leather strap for $269, so that is a chunk less. But still, it's a relatively expensive watch, really. So according to the spec sheet here, we've got a Mecha Quartz VK64 movement inside, which should be evident if we start the chronograph hand. Yeah, the kind of semi-sweep that we've got there, as you can see. This movement is extremely popular, used in lots of these chronograph watches that I've reviewed before. Should have a very fast reset. There we go, straight to 12. The crystal is only mineral crystal on there. It does have 100 meters of water resistance at least. And apparently it's got a tube crown for added character and functionality. Now, I'm going to be completely honest, I've never heard of it referred to as a tube crown before. I've heard of push-pull, screw down and stuff like that, but never heard of one where it specifically mentions tube crown. Really not 100% sure. I think maybe it just means that there's less of a gap and the metal kind of comes right up with a tube out where it joins, potentially for better water performance. But yeah, let me know in the comments. Maybe that's more of a feature on these vintage style watches, because I've never seen it referred to specifically as that before. It also has a bezel which actually works as well. There's a fair amount of backplay on it, but it sounds nice at least. Aligns reasonably. And overall, I think it's quite a good looking watch. I don't think it's stunning, but I think it's pretty good looking. Now, the textured subdials look pretty nice, but what you will notice, and it's part of the listing, everything here is printed onto the dial, which it may be faithful to the original, but it certainly doesn't give the most high-end appearance for a £300 watch. And apparently loads of it is luminescent, but it doesn't look super premium in that regard. The bracelet appears to use solid links. You got this beads of rice style design going on. Looks solid from both ends, and you got solid end links on the underside. The integration is reasonable, but there's definitely a bit of a gap here where it falls short of the lugs. This does mean that if you've got a really thin wrist, there is a significant amount of flexibility. And there's the case rear, kind of just a standard screwed rear there. And that's where your limited edition thing would be at the top. Mineral glass at this price is pushing it, I've got to admit. You know, it's nothing extra special that they've done here, like the Timex Marlin Jet, for instance. And here's a look at it on wrist. From a distance, it looks pretty decent. And the size, as you can see, really suits smaller wrists or those after a really compact watch. Bigger wrists, you're probably going to struggle. It is quite chunky, but, you know, not in a particularly bad way. Bracelet feels decent quality. It is a butterfly, which looks nicer, although you can't adjust it in like fine increments or anything like that. Let's have a look at this under low light and see if the dial trade-off was worth it, you know, making everything luminescent. Was that worth the trade-off of, you know, not having anything really applied to the dial? Nothing super substantial, if I'm going to be honest. Now the 12 and 6 numbers, as you can see there, they are actually fully loomed, which is interesting. But aside from that, it looks no different than a watch with applied markers. Here's a closer look at the dial. You'll have to let me know if you agree with my assessment in the comments. I like the fact that the bezel works and the case finishing is alright. Bracelet's decent too, but mineral at this price and also, you know, just the lack of interest on the dial. You know, I've got this at like £300 and then I've got a watch like this Casio Edifice, which has better case finishing, you know, looks, I'd say, much more expensive, which is less than half the price. And it's got sapphire crystal too. And I know this has got some elements like a domed crystal, and the bracelet is probably slightly better too, but I don't know, it just doesn't quite add up. Personally, I'd probably pick a couple of other watches over this one, such as the Nezumi Tonnerre, for instance. But either way, if you are interested in this one, especially because of that super compact size, then I'll leave a link to it in the video description. And thanks to Rotary for sending it out. I'd love to check out some more of the watches, because maybe I'd get along with them a bit better than this one.